Yes, well, today we commemorate Holocaust Memorial Day to remember, honour and share the stories of the lives of millions of Jews and others persecuted by the Nazi regime. An estimated total of 6 million men, women and children were kidnapped, tortured and murdered between 1941 and 1945.
Well, joining us now, and we're very lucky to be able to do this actually, is a Holocaust survivor, Ivor Perl, who was just 12 years old when he was taken to Auschwitz concentration camp in Poland. Thank you very, very much for joining us this morning. Can you tell me a little bit about when you were about 12 years old, or say, the couple of years before you were actually taken to Auschwitz, and what that was like for you?
Well, actually, the tragedy of the Hungarian Jewry is a double fault. Number one, this happened to us altogether, but also Hungary was part of the Axis power of Germany. So Hungary fought with Germany during the war until they realized that the war was coming to an end, and they tried to make peace overtures with the Allies. And of course, the Germans found out about it and occupied Hungary. I mean, they say occupied, they were there all the time, but overthrew the Hungarian government. And literally, within 3 months, no exaggeration, within 3 months, about 600,000 Jews were most of them put to their death. And I remember as a young child that the peasants were demonstrating outside the town hall because the Hungarians were fighting on the Russian front. Those people that know the Second World War, they were being massacred there. And the peasant kept on shouting, "Why don't you bring our loved ones home from the Russian front?" And they said, "We can't bring them home. We can't afford the infrastructure to bring the wounded soldiers from Russia back to Hungary." Now, as a child, I thought to myself, if they can't bring back the infrastructure to bring the soldiers back, how can they take 400 or 500,000 people to their death? And they're thinking out in my mind, how can somebody hate somebody more than love the others? How could they say that they'd rather take the Jews to their death than bring the loved ones home from the German front?
Mm.
Yeah.
And what do you remember feeling at the time? I mean, obviously nobody could have predicted this event. It was so unprecedented in history. But what thoughts were going through your head and your family at that time?
I think it's a very, very important question because I was 12 years old. Now, what could a 12 years old in Hungary and East Europe think, especially during the war? I could only see and hear what was happening. I couldn't take part in any event at all. But I do remember in 1943, late 43, beginning of 44, there were 3 Jews turned up at the synagogue, and they were from Poland. And they kept on telling us, brethren, take heed. We're being absolutely herded into gas chambers, being burned alive, being buried alive into the camps itself. Do something about it. And you know what? I remember what we told them. We said, "Come on, the more horrible story you tell us, the bigger the charities will give you. But this is Hungary. This is not Poland. These things don't happen here."
No.
And looking back, I thought to myself, how the Germans fooled us all.
Yeah. What was your experience then when you got to Auschwitz? You were on your way. Just talk me through what that was like for you, what you saw, and your memories of that.
Well, the whole story was very, very slow. People say, "How could you allow that to happen to you?" I said, first of all, they lived in a very, very anti-Semitic country. So harassment of the Jews was nothing unusual. So they said, first we said, you mustn't go out in the evening, curfew. Well, we managed that. And then you mustn't fraternize with non-Jews. We could manage that. Gradually, the noose was getting tighter and tighter and tighter, until one day we woke up and everything was just too late to do anything about. But everything was done very, very, very scientifically. And that is why also I have part of the problem, because we keep on saying, what is the answer? The answer is education. Education. I said, it's quite right. But who was the most educated country in the 1930s? Germany. So what did they do with the education? So all the knowledge that you had was helped to increase the death rate more. So I'm not saying education is not the answer, but education on its own has to be.
Yeah, now I hope this is okay with you, really. I've been told that you were there with your mum, is that right? Did you arrive with your mum to Auschwitz?
Yes, well, we're taken into ghettos, eventually a smaller ghetto, a bigger ghetto, and from the bigger ghetto we're herded onto cattle trucks and eventually taken to Auschwitz, which we didn't know where we were taken to. We were told we were going to another country, giving us farmland, and we should be safer than we are where we are. But of course, we attached ourselves to any good news as possible. And before we knew what happens, we were on the train, a cattle truck, for 4 or 5 days. I'm not quite sure how many, but the people should know by now what it meant having the journey from the ghetto to Auschwitz. Once we arrived in Auschwitz, we heard people who were working through the sleds from the cattle truck. You could see people working on the railway line, and they kept on shouting in Yiddish, which was akin to German, that the children must say that if asked what question at any age, they must say they're at least 16 years of age. And the other thing is that do not save any food, eat up all the food, because obviously anywhere you were taken, you were never told how long you were going to be away, so try to last the food out as much as possible. And they said, don't save any food. And the children, I asked how old, they said, you're 16. But of course, we arrived at a place we didn't know where. The doors opened up. It didn't open up very quickly because of banging away, because an awful lot of ill, sick, and dead people on board as well already. And as we sort of dumped out onto the track, there was men and boys one side, women and children another side. And once we started marching, I started running over to my mother, and Mum said, what are you doing here, darling? He said, no, go back to your brother. I said, Mum, please let me come with you. No, I want to come with you. Of course, the luxury of arguing in those conditions were just non-existent. Of course, I went back to my brother. But whether she knew or not, and that was the last time we saw each other, I don't know. All I know is that I never saw my parents again after that.
Thank you for sharing that with us. I just wonder if you can tell us what gave you hope to keep you going through all those difficulties that you faced that are completely unimaginable to us.
You know, that's a wonderful question. I keep asking myself as well, and I don't know. All I can say is I think I was young. I remember saying I haven't lived life. I wanted to see life by instinct. Purely by instinct. It could have been any reason. And in fact, when I think about our survival, I think you had to have luck to survive. But not everybody that had luck survived. You had to have something else. And what that something else, in fact, I remember 2 scientists discussing that subject, what that was, X factor, they said they don't know. So obviously I had that X factor, but I'm not quite sure what it was. Obviously, I wanted to taste life, not having lived at all.
Yes, indeed. What can you remember of your liberation? How that must have felt? And if you don't mind me asking as well, how do you feel about the people who did this? Because it wasn't just camp guards, etc. It wasn't just Adolf Hitler, was it? There were, millions of people who were complicit in this kind of behaviour.
Do you know, Patrick, it's a most wonderful question, because when I give talks to the children and schools or whoever wants to hear the lesson, the question always comes up: do you hate Germany? Do you hate the Germans? And I thought to myself, I said, why do you say, do I hate the Germans? I mean, who were my party was herding into the ghettos, into the gas chamber and working? There were Hungarians, Romanians, Estonians, French. I mean, Germany only gave the green light to do what we wanted to do, but the perpetrators are not Germans. So I think to myself, well, you know what I mean? I've got to go through my life hating everybody. I can't do that. I think what I keep trying to tell humanity, or anybody who wants to listen, is what can happen if you allow yourself to sink to that level. And not, if I may make one suggestion, if one really wants to know about the Holocaust and about anti-Semitism, that every time Jews have suffered, other people have suffered as well. But the Jews keep coming back. And in fact, they're coming back stronger. Thank God for that. But
And what-
every time Jews suffered, other people suffered as well.
Yeah.
And what do you hope the legacy as we move on in time, as the Holocaust itself, becomes almost a distant memory to people of younger generations? What do you hope that the legacy will be, especially for the people of me and Patrick's generation and generations after us?
Yeah.
Well, funny enough, that is a question I would like to ask you. Knowing that all of us are going around, or people are going around telling about the Holocaust and the tragedies, and people don't listen to what happens. Have you seen any improvement in the hatred in humanity?
Well, actually, you only have to look. You only have to look, don't you, to last night in Stamford Hill, where there's two relatively elderly Orthodox Jewish men who were attacked, and not just in relation to Jews. I mean, you look at what's going on in vast swathes of the Middle East and Africa.
That's exactly what I'm saying. I think that I keep on saying that if and when I go up or down, I don't know where I'll go when I leave the world, I'll ask the Maker, there's something very, very wrong in your method with what's happening down below. But I must say that I hope, and I do feel as I'd like to see some improvement about hatred in general, not necessarily anti-Semitism. Because, I mean, when I go around to children, asking them, when did the Holocaust start? And if I was to ask 90% of the people, they say about 35, 32, 39. I said, you're absolutely out by hundreds and hundreds of years. The Holocaust started by the anti-Semitism having being part of certain parties' life, other than somebody came along here and said, right, now, you had anti-Semitism all your life. Now, here's a green button. Do what you want to do.
No, indeed. There are so many questions that I want to ask you, really. One of them, again, I've just had this in my notes, really, is that you came face-to-face with Dr. Mengele, I believe, who's, I think, known as Dr. Death, if that's right. Is that correct?
Well, that's what I said before about the people talking about telling me your age is older than you are, eat all the food. Well, we started marching along, and you could see someone in front of you. Couldn't see the smart uniform with a white glove, pointing left and right. So they say he was Dr. Mengele. I don't know how Dr. Mengele looks like or what he does look like, but it doesn't matter. I don't think it matters at all. But they say it was Dr. Mengele. And I came in front of him, and he asked me, how old are you? Did I say that before? I said, I was 16.
Oh.
And a second, I can still see his face practically every night. He must have thought to himself, kid, if you're telling me lies, it won't last long anyway. So, all right, he put me point to the right.
Goodness.
Which meant you're living. Point to the left for the men's gas chamber.
Wow. I mean, it's just
astonishing. But I gave talk to the Chelsea for the young football team before they go to Auschwitz. I said to him, it's hard to describe to you that what we were given numbers. Why were we given numbers? Because we're not human beings. Now, I kid you not, if you see a fly or something on a table and you smack it and you kill it, and it's exactly how we were thought of as well.
I mean, look, goodness gracious me. Well, look, thank you so much for your time, for that insight. I mean, I could talk to you all day about it, and You know, thank you so much for making the time for us, really.
Absolutely.
As Ivor Perl there, of course, survived the Holocaust, and goodness gracious me, I'm actually lost for words.
Yeah, I mean, you have so many. There's so many questions, and at the same time, you almost don't know what to say because it's so poignant, so moving, and it's an incredible. You have to hear people's stories like that. It really
it makes
hits
it
home.
real, doesn't it?
Yeah, it really
makes
does.
it real.
It really does.
Anyway, well, look.